In the previous semesters, you must have handled different subjects pertaining to different HRM functions as in talent management, total quality management, labor relations, labor laws, industrial relations, compensation management, performance management and so on, right. Now, this semester you will handle this interesting subject called International Human Resource Management, which is the same as what you had learned in your previous semesters, but it is different to the extent that we are discussing all these functions in the context of international business. Okay. So, to that extent it is interesting yet little challenging, because all along you would have handled these subjects in the national context. Now, we will be moving on to the international context, right. Now, there are few topics which I thought I would try to line up for today. We will start with a definition, and then I will brief you through how international human resource management is different from your domestic human resource management, and other critical organizational strategic decisions as to staffing policy, which talks about the recruitment and selection process, about the compensation packages offered to expatriates or multinational employees working in different locations, and also performance management as to how different performance management as a function is different in the international context. So, these are few topics which I have lined up for today. Now, let me start with the basic definition of what international human resource management is all about. A branch of management studies that investigates the design and effects of organizational human resource practice in cross-cultural contexts. Okay. So, the last part of the definition is what makes this particular subject different from what you have already learnt, the cross-cultural context, right. Now, as such, handling people is a mammoth task. Okay. When you are talking about handling people in the international context, you are talking about people from diversified background, who are from different nationalities, who are from different ethnicity, who speak different language, who believe in different things, whose needs and motivations are different. So, the diversity of the workforce that the human resource has to handle as a function is quite a diversified background. To that extent, the operation becomes complex. And moreover, as I said, if you are talking about HRM in the national context, you would abide by the law of land, a particular taxation structure, a certain standard of living is maintained, and therefore, it is easy for you to frame the policies within these framework. But when a business goes global, when the business wants to take their their operations to at the global level, you would probably have to handle 2 to 3 different nationalities, people from different nationalities. Like where you operate is called as the home country, where you would want to operate would become the host country, and if you are recruiting somebody from a different national in the host country, then that becomes a third country national operation, right. So, a business can choose either to go international or to go as a multinational company or to become a transnational company. So, this is decided basically by the availability of the resources, the long term orientation of the business, the ability of the business to take risk and so on and so forth, right. Now, all these adds to the complexities of handling the business and in turn the human resource function as such. Now, we will look into the difference between international human resource management and human resource management in the domestic market. Now, as I said, how international HRM is different from domestic HRM, I have given a few pointers here for you to understand. It encompasses heterogeneous and complex function. Okay. As I had said, for example, if you are talking about staffing policy, okay, it is easy to frame a staffing policy for a domestic HRM, whereas when you want to do it in the international context, you have to think which route you want to take. For example, there are options where you can take a polycentric approach, you can take an ethnocentric approach, or you can take a geocentric approach. Each of these staffing policy has their own merits and demerits, about which I will list out in the slides to come. But I am just talking about one HR function and its complexities in the international context. So, similarly, everything, even the compensation for that matter, how you devise a compensation for an employee in the domestic HRM context, and how you do it for an expatriate. Okay. So, 3 things you need to remember: the package that you give for an expatriate, and also things that you have to remember when he comes back or she comes back to the home country, how are you going to repatriate them. So, these are some of the compensation decisions the organization needs to take. Others being the taxation structure, how the host country taxation structure, their legal, political, social setup affects the performance of the employees are some things that needs to be thought about well in advance when you frame the policies. So that's the reason I have mentioned here clearly as the functions being more complex and heterogeneous. Now apart from that, you have to work in an ever changing environment. It could be the, as I said, the political setup, it could be the social setup, it could be the taxation structure again, it could be the currency fluctuation. All these have to be encountered or anticipated in order to make your HR policy sound enough to ensure that you retain the employees in the long run. As I said, it is complex because you need to satisfy diversified people and also comply with lot of legal framework, social framework, political framework where you are operating. So it is also, that is also one of the point I have mentioned, it is influenced by many external sources. And it also involves a lot of risk compared to your domestic HRM. For example, if you are expatriating an employee to a host country, as I said, you have to think way beyond what you need to satisfy or keep him happy at the host country in terms of it could be taking care of his travel, it could be taking care of his accommodation or taking care of his family needs, education and so on and so forth. So that way the level of involvement of HR into the personal lives of the employee is also more. So that makes it little risky and more complex also to handle. Otherwise, you are operating in a different labor market. The labor market, in terms of labor market, we need to think about the supply and demand of labor, the availability of the skill, the education system the host country provides. So these are some of the considerations that you have to think about when you're operating in a foreign land. And goes without saying the different employment laws, because anywhere you operate, you have to abide by the law of land. And the influence of trade unions. For example, in European countries, a few European countries like Sweden, they are heavily influenced by trade unions. So when you choose to operate in a country like Sweden, you need to also anticipate the involvement of trade unions and its influence on the operation of business. And goes without saying, the last but very important one, adopting to different cultural expectations is something which you need to address to, and it is of high importance. And the next few slides we will be actually talking about this in detail to see how culture as a factor plays a very, very fundamental difference, makes a fundamental difference in handling people, right? So before we talk about handling people from diversified background and where the difference lies in their cultural background, let's understand what culture is all about. Okay. So as I have defined here, it is a set of traditional beliefs and values which are transmitted and shared in a given society as norms and culture. Okay. So it is something which is practiced over a period of time, a set of beliefs which people believe in, and it is passed from one generation to the other. Okay. So where does it gain importance in the business context is the way one behaves depends upon what culture you are from, what beliefs you carry. Okay. So it is not just the individual behavior, collectively it also becomes the organizational behavior which is of a prime consideration for any human resource. So that's exactly why we have to understand and adopt to the different cultural framework when you are going global. Now we will look into the different cultural dimensions that affects the operation of business in the international context. Now here is an interesting depiction of the different dimensions of culture that needs to be considered, which has been put forth by Gert Hofstede, who is a Dutch social psychologist, who says that these cultural differences could be, impact the business in terms of power distance, individualism versus collectivism, long-term orientation, uncertainty avoidance, and masculinity versus femininity. So as I had mentioned earlier, let me explain you the different dimensions of culture put forth by Gert Hofstede, the Dutch social psychologist. So he says that power distance, individualism versus collectivism, long-term orientation, uncertainty avoidance, and masculinity versus femininity are some of the factors that falls as an aftermath or as an effect of the cultural difference in business, right? Now if you look at power distance, what do you mean by power distance? It is nothing but the relationship between high ranking and the low ranking employees in an organization. Or in other words, we can say it is a relationship between the management and the employees. So if the management feels that they need to have a high power distance, They will maintain a safe distance from the employees in terms of communication, in terms of hierarchical structure, and in terms of being very formal with the employees. But at the same time, if a country as a culture, if they feel that they need to have a closer power distance or a shorter power distance, to that extent the communication becomes little informal and the structure becomes flatter. The organizational structure becomes little flatter. So depending upon what the country believes in as a culture to be maintained, it has a fallout on the style of operation of business. So similarly, if you look at individualism versus collectivism, okay, like some countries believe highly in individualism, where individual success is credited more, or in other words, entrepreneurships are nurtured. The best example could be the United States of America, where you see a lot of entrepreneurs flourishing because of the fact that they believe in individualism than collectivism. Okay. So the states or the government's intervention in business is very, very little here, and it is more for individual to prove their point, to implement their ideas and grow up. There is hardly any framework meant for them to do their operation. But if you look at country like Japan, which believes more in collectivism, there the style of operation is, it is not just me who has to win, it is my team, or as an organization or as a country that we need to win, is the mindset of people there. So accordingly, as I said earlier, the style of operation would differ, wherein people will be willing to work in team rather than take credit for their own merits and demerits. So that is how these cultural factors affect the style of operation. If you look at long-term orientation, again, Japan is a good example, where people look at organization and career as a very long-term association. They don't look at it as a short-term association wherein they look individually or internally to see what is that I will get during my tenure in this particular job, and then they would like to move on and grow in their career. It is not so. They probably want to feel more secured and be associated with the company for a longer period of time compared to other countries which probably believes in individualism, where people look inwardly to look what they have achieved. Probably they are more self-focused, and therefore the long-term orientation will not exist there. It is more of short-term orientation. If you look at uncertainty avoidance, to what extent the country or the people are willing to take up risk. Again, it's a comparison between United States and Japan. It doesn't mean to say that Japan doesn't appreciate ideas or innovation from employees, but it's just that it takes a longer period of time for them to validate a particular idea that comes as a suggestion and to be implemented. Whereas these decisions are made quite quickly in a country like United States, where they would be willing to explore and they would love to take risks. So United States is considered as one of the highest risk acceptance country that way, right? And now moving on to the next factor, masculinity versus femininity. It talks about who is probably more dominant in the society. There are certain countries even today, even when they have developed so much, they don't really encourage women workforce to take up higher positions in the corporate. Okay, so those countries are more masculine driven, whereas there are other countries which encourage women or probably give them additional quota, or they reserve certain seats which is meant for women, and they encourage women to take up positions in higher levels as well. So that is one factor which has been beautifully put forth by Gert Hofstede as to how cultural factor impacts the operation of business. Okay, so this is a small matrix which briefs you those countries which believe in low and high power distance, and also between individualism and collectivism. If you see countries like Colombia, Peru, Thailand, Singapore, Greece, Mexico, Turkey, Japan and Indonesia are those which believe in high power distance and also believes in collectivism. Whereas countries like Israel, Finland, Germany, Ireland, New Zealand, Canada, Great Britain and United States, as I had just mentioned now, they believe in lower power distance and more of individualism as something which they believe in. So this is just a matrix to capture those countries which believe in the power distance, the type of power distance and the difference between individualism and collectivism. So this is a world map for you, just to orient yourself to the location of the different countries in the map. Because there are a couple of models that we would discuss in the in the forthcoming classes, which talks about how HRM practices can be followed, are followed in different countries. There are two popular models. One is called as the Harvard model, which is mostly practiced by many of the countries. And there is another model called Brewster model, which is very specific to the European continent. So that's the picture of Europe for you. European continent, I'm sure you must be familiar with. It constitutes of 50 plus countries, and 28 countries form the European Union, and the popular or the common currency that they use is euro. And it is little different from the rest of the globe in terms of operations, wherein human resource is given more importance in terms of government interference in the operation of, in the business operation, in terms of providing training and development for the employees, and there is heavy investment as such made on the human resources by the European countries mostly, and therefore the labor laws are also to that extent stricter. And in certain countries, the role of trade unions are also quite high. As I had mentioned, Sweden is one such country, but there are other countries like France where the role of trade unions doesn't really matter. But still, it as a continent, it is very tech savvy. They are people who respect knowledge a lot, and they people who value people a lot, and therefore the application of the human resource management as a function is little different when compared to, say, United States or Japan, as we had discussed earlier. So regarding this model, I will discuss about that in in an elaborative way in the forthcoming class. Now we will look into the different practices in different countries like United States of America, Japan and Europe. Now let me move on to the next slide, which captures the certain pointers. I have put on certain pointers which talks about how culture as a factor impacts the role of operation, the business operation, right. So first point is about how they are known for their strong strategies and managerial innovation. So this is probably why entrepreneurship is flourishing in United States. And also if you see, the hierarchy is meant more for convenience purpose because they believe in lesser power distance. So the communication between the management and the employees are also very informal and direct. They don't really give a message or communicate in an indirect way. Whatever is, be it a praise or a reprimand, it is done on the face because they believe in a very informal setup. And employees are more self-focused, concerned with personal success. They're very ambitious and goal-oriented, and therefore the hiring and the compensation is also only on merit and not on any other criteria as your hierarchy or gender. And as I had mentioned earlier, they are high risk acceptance country, and they're always open for new innovations and ideas. Now that's about United States. A few things which I would like to mention about Japan. It is a masculine society in which the world is driven by competition and success. It is a land of new ideas and innovation, but still it takes a longer period of time for them to implement, and that's why probably it's because of their nature of uncertainty avoidance. And they also believe in long-term orientation, and therefore there's lot of investment made in training and R&D, like how I had spoken about Europe. And they're also very, very mindful of the hierarchical positions. I'm sure you must have heard as to how seniority is one criteria which is considered for promotions in Japanese context. So that's the reason, because they believe in hierarchical position, and seniors are respected, and they believe in high power distance. They're very strong and loyal because of their long-term orientation, and they have this winning culture. When I say winning culture, it is not just individual winning, it is the team spirit or the team winning that they value more than the individual winning. So they would be willing to even sacrifice their personal interest for their group success. So probably this is one unique feature of the Japanese practices or their cultural fallout. And perceived social value of their work is considered important than profit making. So that again is a fallout of why they feel that as a team they should win, and it is not just for profit making or for individual success. Now we talk about the HRM practices or the influencers in European context. They are very highly influenced by trade unions, and this is a continent which believes in investing a lot of money on R&D and training and development. So a lot of investment is made on human resource management, and the influence of regional clusters is also high. As I had said, there are a lot of countries in the European continent which form part of the European Union. So within the Union, there are certain clusters of countries. For example, Germany, Italy and France can form one structure which are very, very highly technology oriented, and they are mostly into manufacturing automobiles and other technical products. So their orientation and their HRM practices are little distinct from the rest of the continent by virtue of being a part of a cluster. And otherwise, they are very institutionalistic perspective, whether it's the education system, financial exchange, legal and industrial relation system has a heavy influence on the human resource management. Now we'll look into the staffing policy decisions that an organization can make when they go global. Now having discussed about the cultural aspects and its effect on the role of business and the business operation in the international context, one important strategic decision the business has to take is about the staffing policy. Okay. So what are the choices available for a business when it goes global as far as their staffing policy is concerned? One could be the polycentric approach, another could be the geocentric approach, and the third approach could be the ethnocentric one. Okay. So what do you mean by ethnocentric? Ethnocentric is when a business decides to grow global, they would want to have the same type of operation that they would be doing or they are doing in the home country. They want to just replicate the same kind of operation in their host country, right. So that is called as ethnocentric approach, approach where they want to replicate what they have been already successfully practicing in the home country. Now if you look at polycentric approach, which talks about the staffing policy where unlike the home country, unlike the practice that they do in the home country, they would want to try something different in the host country, which is probably adopted by many of the multinational companies, wherein they want to tailor make the products, the practices, everything to suit the local conditions. So if the business decides to go polycentric, which means they will adopt their human resource policies to suit the local law of land. So that is one such approach. And the next one being geocentric. Geocentric is where they feel the globe is one place to operate, and therefore they will have similar policy in whichever country they operate, irrespective of the law of land in which law of land that guides the business. So these are the three different policies or approaches they can adopt as far as the staffing policy is concerned. Now let me take you through the pros and cons of each of these. Now if a company decides to go with an ethnocentric approach, one advantage is the top positions are occupied by qualified and experienced person who would go from the home country. So to that extent you will be able to control and exercise uniformity in culture and better control over the foreign operations. So that these are considered as a merit. If you look at the flip side, the cost of operation would be high when you have to send somebody or expatriate somebody from the home country. So therefore the cost of operation could be high, and you may not be able to tap the local resources in the country of operation, which may not really go down well with the local people in the host country. So those are some of the disadvantages. If you look at polycentric as an approach, so it is something which facilitates organizational learning and utilization of local market. So which means the organization can tap the local resources to run their business. For that matter, even in the top positions they might look for resources from the local market, and which means it also in turns results in reduction of cost, and it also eliminates the cultural myopia. The fact that you are not able to adopt to local culture, that kind of mindset will not exist. And on the flip side, the demerits would be cultural integration could be a challenge, since you would be handling people from different ethnicity, different cultural background. Managing them and controlling them could be a challenge, and it could also create knowledge and performance gap. Like as compared to an ethnocentric approach where you are very sure about how this person who has moved from the home country is going to operate, you may not have or expect that kind of a performance from a local resource who has been hired in the host country. Now the third one being the geocentric approach, the most flexible of all the approach. As I had mentioned, it is flexible and sources the global best talent. The biggest advantage in this particular approach is you will be able to move people from one end to the other without any hesitation, because everybody will be on the same line in terms of compensation, in terms of package, in terms of their experience, knowledge. So it is easy to swap the resource between two different countries where you are operating. And the advantage is you will have a multicultural background, and it also increases the firm's cultural knowledge. On the flip side, Problem again could be in terms of cultural integration, since people are from different ethnicity, and immigration of employees or cost of relocation or diversity background could be a challenge for the human resource management. So girls, with whatever we have discussed today, I am confident you had a glimpse of what international human resource management is all about. How is it different from the domestic human resource management, which we had already seen in the previous semesters. And we also covered the different cultural dimensions that impacts the operation of business in the international context, and other strategic decisions as to how staffing policy can be done, how compensation management has to be tailor made to suit international operation, how performance management has to be done in the international context, and how training and development is also different in the international context compared to your domestic HRM. Okay. So, these are some of the things which we will cover in the forthcoming classes. So, with this I would like to wind up for today. Thank you girls.